Hey everyone, Buzerio here, and today we're talking about Splitgate. Splitgate is Halo with portals. Until recently, the devs even had the phrase Halo meets Portal on the store page. They take Halo's gameplay, throw in the portal gun from Portal, and the dynamic completely changes. I'd argue they're also doing Halo's gameplay better than Halo Infinite right now, but more on that later. Since the two games are so similar, I will be comparing them later in the review. Before we can talk about portals, we've got to talk about the base gameplay. So without wasting any more time, let's jump into the review. Splitgate is a fast-paced arena shooter which wears its inspiration from Halo on its sleeve. With the addition of a jetpack and portals, Splitgate is a higher mobility game than Halo, although I'm not sure I'd really call it a movement shooter. The weapons will all be familiar if you've played Halo before. The only weapon which doesn't feel directly taken from Halo's arsenal is the railgun. Arguably, the railgun is just a slightly different Spartan laser, so I could even see a case that that's been ripped. Although they're not particularly original, all of the weapons do give good feedback and they are satisfying to use. The power weapons are strong here, but so are all of the non-starting weapons, which makes traversing around the maps more important, as even a non-power weapon pickup can increase your power quite a bit. Unlike Halo, there are no grenades in this game. Well, technically there are grenades, but all they do is destroy portals. They do no damage to players. There's also no vehicles, although the map design in this game wouldn't really suit them, and I have trouble thinking about how they'd work if they were to add them. On the topic of maps, the selection here is decently broad. I don't love all of the maps, but they are distinct both visually and in terms of gameplay, and the selection is a lot wider than that in Halo Infinite. There is a custom map maker, and the devs have said they want to add some community maps to the main rotation, which should help the variety even more. There's a huge variety of modes, which really helps to keep the game fresh. The selection of modes here is probably better than any other FPS I've played, at least in recent memory. I'll talk about the modes in more detail a bit later. All of these things combine to make an experience with a distinctly arcadey feel. Compared to the serious tone of games like Halo, particularly Infinite, this game is colourful, jovial, and lighthearted. Now you can't really talk about Splitgate without mentioning the portal mechanic. The mechanic is ripped almost directly from Portal, and it's going to be very familiar. On your wrist, there's a portal gun. At any point you can shoot one of two portals. When both are placed, they create a single connected space. You can also close either portal with a single button press. Portable surfaces are placed generously throughout the levels, and the mechanic adds another dimension to the gameplay. It enables lightning-quick movement around the maps, especially in the hands of skilled players that know the maps well. It also deepens fights with opponents. As a simple example of a mind game the portals create, a common tactic is to shoot a portal behind someone, go through it and fight them from behind. An experienced player may anticipate this and try to turn around to face you coming out of the portal. This allows you to trick players by shooting a portal behind them, making it look like you're going to go through it, and then at the last moment turning around and shooting them without going through the portal. This is an example of the kind of mind games this mechanic adds. Splitgate is full of moments like this, especially in its one-on-one fights. The portals open up a lot of room to get creative with how you approach these fights. The portal gun also helps to make the map a bit more dangerous. You can never be sure if you're actually safe anywhere, because there's so many more angles that an enemy can come from. The way this portal mechanic spices up the game is interesting. There's a kind of derivative innovation here, where Splitgate takes two existing concepts and smashes them together to create something new and interesting. Portals and Halo have both obviously been done before, but together, they create something new entirely. Now that I've covered the base gameplay mechanics, I can move on to talking about the modes. There's a massive amount of modes in this game, so I'm going to summarise the types rather than describe each one in detail. On the competitive side, you have King of the Hill and Domination, as well as some variants of those, and the classic Team Deathmatch. All of those are pretty much what you'd expect. There's also a 3v3 takedown mode played on smaller maps. Every time someone dies, it increases the respawn time for their entire team. A team wins the round by having all of the enemy players dead at the same time. It takes a little bit of time to get your head around, but it's a mode that I could see being a great time in ranked with a free stack. The tension of being the last man standing, trying to stay alive while your team watch and wait to respawn is really quite something. I think this is a mode you're either going to love or hate. There are also a couple of other modes played on the smaller 3v3 maps. I'm not a fan of the smaller maps, I find them bland visually, and their design usually de-emphasises portals, which to me is the most interesting part of the game. Moving on to more casual modes, there are unranked versions of all of the ranked modes. There's also some Halo classics like SWAT, Fiesta, Oddball, and Capture the Flag. There's a good selection of more light-hearted modes like Flying Splitball and Laser Tag. There's really too many casual modes to talk about in detail. Suffice it to say, if you're interested in the more casual side of this game, there is a lot of content here for you. That's primarily the way I play the game. I'll join a party with a friend and we'll select all the modes and just play for a couple of hours, always surprised by what's coming next. A lot of the modes are quite silly, but it gives the game a ton of variety that you won't find in a lot of other games these days, especially Halo Infinite. Let's save the comparison with Halo Infinite for a little bit longer though, and discuss the visuals first. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the way Splitgate looks. For me, the visuals of this game range from bland to downright ugly. The game is colourful and the visual information is clear, but that's about all the visuals have going for them. The character models don't do anything for me, and neither do most of the maps. As I've already mentioned, I hate the look of the smaller simulation maps. They just look so bland to me. They have recently hired some new artists, and the art direction has been better recently, so maybe this will improve over time. The game is clearly lower budget than a lot of its competition, and the way the game looks is one of the areas that shows the most. We'll have to see whether or not this game manages to improve its visuals with its new art direction. For now though, I really don't like how this game looks. It's time to talk about the elephant in the room. As you may have noticed, it's hard to talk about this game without comparing it to Halo. The inspiration is so clear. So why avoid it? Let's compare Splitgate and the latest game in the Halo series, Halo Infinite. From a gameplay perspective, Splitgate is faster paced, and the portals help distinguish it from Infinite. Infinite's gameplay is probably tighter overall, but I do find it gets a bit more repetitive because there's not that much freedom in how you engage in fights. On the repetitive note, Splitgate has an absolute mountain of modes and maps. Halo Infinite is really lacking in both of these. Throughout a single play session of Infinite, you'll probably play on the same mode and map several times. Compare that to Splitgate, where you can play for hours and barely ever see the same mode or map. One issue that's plagued Infinite so far is its lack of updates. The game's main issue at launch was that it was lacking in content, and it's really only received a tiny drip feed of content since. Comparatively, Splitgate gets updates regularly, and the updates often add significant changes or new maps and modes. As Splitgate receives more and more updates, this gulf in content will only grow wider. Another issue that many have with Halo Infinite is its Battle Pass. Halo Infinite's Battle Pass is a pain to complete, and many of the challenges require you to play in a way that's detrimental to your team. With Splitgate's Battle Pass, it's easy to make good progress simply by playing the game. Although it's more a matter of taste rather than anything objective, I do currently prefer Splitgate to Halo Infinite. Splitgate has replaced Infinite in the group that I play with. That's not to say that Infinite doesn't have strengths over Splitgate. Graphically, Infinite looks much better, and big team battle just isn't something you'll find in Splitgate. Halo also has a massive IP behind it, and no doubt the bigger player base. Because of this, it's quite likely that Infinite will outlive Splitgate. I can't really compare the two games competitively. While I have played ranked in both games, I'm nowhere near good enough to comment on the relative balance of either game. Quite frankly, these are games that I play when I'm looking for something casual and fun. I lean more towards games like fighting games when I'm looking for a competitive experience. Because of this, I'm probably not the best person to judge how good the games are to grind in ranked, or to play at a serious level. It's hard to definitively say which is the better game between the two, but at the moment I definitely prefer Splitgate. For you, it will most likely come down to whether or not you like the portal mechanics, as they're an important part of Splitgate. Both games are free, so you can always try both and see which you prefer. Now, this wouldn't be a fair review if I didn't point out some of Splitgate's bigger issues. Firstly, I find the art style lacking, especially the simulation maps. There's also a lack of uniqueness, particularly in the weapons in Splitgate. The game can feel very generic at times, and doesn't have much of its own identity outside of the portals. Splitgate has a particularly high skill ceiling, and playing against people that are better than you isn't a fun experience. The portals create a huge gap between people who know the maps and have mastered the movement with them, and people who haven't. I imagine that if you want to get good at this game, you're going to have to spend a long time studying maps and learning portal routes through them. The biggest issue with Splitgate isn't any of this though. The biggest issue is the game's population. This is a niche game, and the player base does seem to be gradually declining over time. At the moment, it doesn't seem like there's much coming to reinvigorate the game. There's still enough players to get good matches, and queue times have never been an issue for me personally, although if you're in a remote region or playing at odd times, they may be more of an issue. The game is technically still in beta, but in name only, and I doubt the full launch is going to bring many people back. Because of all this, the long-term life of Splitgate is questionable. Despite regular updates, most games in this genre do die out, and I'm not sure what, if anything, the devs can do to stop it trending that way. Perhaps the custom maps will help to keep the game healthy long term. Currently, the player base is healthy, but it is slowly trending downwards, and it's going to die out eventually. That's just inevitable. All of that might make it seem like Splitgate's future is bleak, but the game isn't dead by any means. It receives regular updates with new maps, modes, and other content. They've also recently released a map maker, as I've mentioned, and the devs have mentioned that they want to put the community maps into the rotation of regular maps, which could really bolster the game. There's a new team of artists that seem to be hard at work to improve the art style of the game, and the game does have a lot of potential and a dedicated player base. If the game keeps trending in this way and making more positive updates, I could see it becoming a bit more popular over time. Splitgate is a good game, although not a flawless one. It's a niche game, and you've probably already worked out if it's for you or not. The game has both a high skill cap and enough content to remain interesting casually. I've been playing the game casually for a long time, and I'm probably going to stick with it until something else comes along and grabs my attention. That said, I don't think I could see myself playing it more often than I already do, which is around a few hours every couple of weeks with some friends. There's a lot of FPS games on the market, and even though this game does have some unique elements, it is a little bit generic and it can sometimes merge into the sea of other games. It's worth checking out if you're interested, but you're also not missing a huge deal by skipping it. Make sure to leave a like and a subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.